Hi guys, this is Jess with This Tiny Schoolhouse, and today I wanted to go over making your own excavation kit. The first thing that you need is something to excavate. We're using shells. You'll also need something to mix with. We're just using a popsicle stick. You'll need something to measure with, some cool water. You need some kind of mold. I got this silicone mold off of Amazon. It's like a mini bread mold, and it worked really well for this project. Something to mix your plaster of Paris in. And then you also need dry mix of plaster of Paris. This is what you're actually making your excavation kit out of. So once you gather all of the needed materials, you're going to want to go ahead and get started. You will take 2 parts of plaster of Paris per 1 part cool water. You can mix up as much as you want, but I am just mixing up enough to coat the bottom of the silicone mold. I'm going to mix up a little bit first, that way the shells don't just sink to the bottom of the mold. This stuff sets very, very quickly, so you do kind of have to work fast, and it's also really important to make sure that you don't breathe any of that dry mix in. We were really careful. I did this part myself. I didn't want the kids to know what was going on anyways. So I just mixed everything up and coated a little tiny, maybe an inch, half inch on the bottom of each mold and let it set for a while. So after only about an hour, you guys can see it already has hardened enough for me to go ahead and move on to the next step. Both molds are hardened pretty quickly, so I was excited to get going. At this point, all I'm doing is putting in the shells on top of that layer, trying to be gentle so they don't poke through. I definitely put in too many shells. I ended up with some holes. I should have only probably done 2 or 3 per mold, but I just wanted to get as much out of it as possible. Next time, I know that less is more when it comes to excavating these. So again, I am just mixing up some new plaster of Paris. And again, I wish I would have mixed up more. I ended up having to mix up more in a minute. I'm using a spoon this time instead of a popsicle stick because I wanted to be able to scrape the bowl better. But again, I still didn't end up with enough to really cover everything that I needed to cover. So here in a second, I'm going to be mixing up more. At this point, you're just going to want to cover as much of the material you plan on excavating as possible. We're using shells because we're doing our ocean unit study, so I thought it would be fun to kind of talk about how different sediments will lay on top of the shells and that kind of thing, but also just get into shells, the different type of shells, and what they are used for. Also, this is just a fun activity, fun hands-on thing to remember for doing the ocean unit study. As you can see, I'm mixing up some more plaster of Paris. I didn't make enough the first time to cover both molds as much as I wanted. You really want to make sure that you fill up your mold as much as possible. I definitely could have even mixed more and filled it up even more and had to dig through a little bit more before we got to our shells. It kind of just depends on what you are excavating. Now, I thought that this would be a very fun activity to do. We love doing the excavation kits that you can buy. I wish I would have saved some of the tools from that, but I never did. Now, all you have to do is let it set. Now, the longer it sets, the harder it will get. So we only let ours set for 24 hours so that my 8-year-old was able to get through it. And it still took her a good while to start finding the shells. It is a learning process for sure. So here is how they turned out the next day. I did have a couple holes from doing them, but we're going to go and excavate them now. They turned out really well, I think.
Can I make a Play-Doh?
And Noah made some Play-Doh.
Not just gonna be flour and salt and oil. Whoa, look at this. Is it your main stranger?
I hope not.
Is he good stranger?
I hope so.
I broke it in 2. Is there any in this?
I don't know.
Now I have 2 shells to dig at. Scoop some more. Scoop some more. Scoop some more. Oh, Mommy, look at this. I think it might be time to wipe some off. Jess, shoot in your way. How about we make a dessert, but it's a sandwich. Nom 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 nom. Yeah.